This is a first for me, and I hope it's useful for you. I really appreciate your interest in working with the news media. It's been pretty much most of my professional life, and I've gotten a lot of satisfaction out of it. Michelle asked me if I would do this, and I said, sure, why not? It's always good to try new things. So what we're going to do tonight is first I'll tell you a little bit about my background, and then I have a PowerPoint presentation on some basics. What is news? What it means to us as in the nonprofit world. I'll find out who you are and what you're interested in learning about, what your backgrounds are a little bit. And then the second half, after a break, is we'll come back and we'll work on some news releases. I was asking Michelle to give me some bad news releases, and she was happy to oblige. Yeah, well, I don't know if you're here. I don't know. And actually, it made me realize that yes, there is really something to this. I mean, there are some really bad news releases out there, which is kind of embarrassing for the profession. But there's always room for improvement. I mean, we can certainly learn from each other. I believe Michelle has posted the PowerPoint and the materials. I'll be going over the materials. I did put together a rudimentary media list for Washita and Livingston County. I actually covered 33 counties, but I'm guessing that you probably don't cover that many, but I do go to media workshops all the time, and I was recently at one in Livingston County at the United Way up there, so I added some notes from that, and like I said, my media list, and then a photo release, which is photo release is kind of out of date anyway. We were talking in the office today about how, with the Facebook and the internet and everything, little kids put their photos online, even though they're not supposed to, but Girl Scouts is a membership organization, so you'll hear about it from our point of view. What we do nowadays, instead of a photo release, is when the girls sign up or the adults sign up, we assume that they will allow us to use their image, unless they sign a special form that doesn't allow us to use their image. So we'll talk about that a little bit later if you want to. But when I introduce you guys, or when you introduce yourselves and you have questions, I'll try to get them up on the flip chart. And then I'm told that we're live streaming, so there may be some people out in cyberspace that are going to join us, which will be interesting for me as well. So anyway, it really is a joy to talk about this kind of work. I think it's vitally important. We know how much the media landscape has changed, really, in the past 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Everything's different now. But what hasn't changed is that people still need accuracy, and they still need content. They still need good content. And that's pretty much what I see our department doing at Girl Scouts, is providing accurate, true content that people can then use in different platforms and such. So, years ago you had layers and layers of editors to get through in print or on broadcast, and it was often a matter of convincing those people that what you had to say was important. And now we're pretty much creating content and sending it out there. And I'm taking content from you, and you're taking content from me, and it's different. But there still are gatekeepers, and there still are ways that we hope we can make their jobs a little easier. So let's get started. I'm hoping this is going to work. Let's see what happens. Yay! Okay, I'm wrapping up a graduate certificate in nonprofit management at Eastern. I'm working as a communications specialist for Girl Scouts Heart of Michigan, which is the mega council that was just merged 3 years ago from 5 Girl Scout councils, and this is the way of the nonprofit world, more and more mergers. So that's why Linda and I covered 33 counties. Jackson, Kalamazoo, Lansing, Saginaw, and Ann Arbor are our 5 regional centers. So we'll talk a little more about the challenge of that a little bit later on. Previously, I worked for what was then called Washita United Way. It's now called the United Way of Washita County, as communications director. Before that, I was with the local council, Girl Scouts of the Huron Valley Council. Before that, I worked for Huron Valley Ambulance, which a lot of people don't realize is a nonprofit agency. It's a multi-county nonprofit ambulance service, but when we started out, it was just in Washita County. And then I've also done freelance work for some clients, such as Catholic Social Services, the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation, visiting nurses, and I started out actually as an old-fashioned newspaper reporter, an editor in Pennsylvania. I worked for a company called Dardanelle Publications, and before that, the Pittsburgh Press, which doesn't exist anymore. So it's one of those things that's kind of gone by the wayside. And I do have a bachelor's degree in Bachelor's of Science in Journalism from WVU, West Virginia University. So the best way to contact me if you have questions or comments, you want to continue our conversation, is my email, char.luttrell@gmail.com. So now I'd like to, before I go any further, find out who you are and why you're here. And I know your first name, so I guess I'll pick on Linda. And you can introduce yourself, Linda, and let us know what you're about, what you'd like to learn tonight, or just some sort of comment.
Well, I'm a volunteer who works with SHAR. I've been writing press releases, editorial opinions, and other stories for the Girl Scouts. In terms of learning new things, well, I started working with the Girl Scouts because I like to write and I'm pretty good at it, and I didn't know how to write for the media and I wanted to learn how to do that, so SHAR has taught me a lot about that area, and I enjoy working.
Tell me about your PVC, the volunteer group that you work with.
Okay. I also do the newsletter and I do the publicity for the Professional Volunteer Corps. And so I've gotten to use a lot of the knowledge that I've gained at the Girl Scout office, and I've been able to use that in my current position with that group.
Any burning questions?
Can't think of it.
Okay, Bob.
Well, I'm Bob Cummings. I'm the media spokesperson for Christian Science throughout the state. So I work with all of the media statewide, a little wider than yours. And I do get involved with submitting guest columns, press releases, letters to the editor. So all of those are of interest to me. I looked ahead at some of your notes. I have a question about what the 8 elements of the news are. Hope you'll cover that. And I did have a question about what's the current procedure for release forms for things like photos, videos, audio recordings. So those are areas that I'm interested in.
Okay, thanks, Bob. And you just came in. Would you tell us your name and what you'd like to get out of this and where you're from?
Sure. Hi, my name's Dawn Massey. I work at Hood Clinic, and I'm a grant writer, and occasionally we submit press releases, so I don't really have much training in submitting press releases, so I was just hoping to learn more about elements I should include and what I can do to getting them to the church.
Okay, thank you. And there should be a name card going around for you to sign your first name.
Actually, we need another, I think.
Oh, okay, here's some. Right here and the mark. Okay, and next we have Mark.
Mark.
Is that right?
I'm from Dexter. I'm involved in about a dozen volunteer organizations, and I seem to be the front man for publishing information about events or writing news articles. I write a newsletter for a singles group. When I learn of events, I forward the information on to the Heritage Papers and 2 others. I'm less than a diamond in the rough. I've got really good writing skills, but they really need to be honed. And I like disseminating information. And something I've learned since we've gone through less of a printed medium, a lot of folks don't know what's going on in the community. Hear that over and over again. So
That's a great point. Yeah, we have that too. Okay, anything you want us to be sure to touch on up here?
just, I'll dovetail what everyone else said.
Okay.
I didn't even think to ask those type of questions.
Okay, good. Okay, Michelle.
Michelle Rogers, I'm managing editor of Heritage Media West, and this community media lab we put together as part of my Idea Lab project. So I'm organizing workshops. If anyone's interested in teaching one, I approached Shar to do this workshop, and we're looking to do others throughout the summer and into the fall. So please let me know. And I'm the one on the receiving end, receiving these press releases.
We're going to try to make your job easier, right?
Yeah. I know. I commented at the other workshop. I was promoting this, and I said I feel a little selfish in hosting this workshop because it's to benefit me, really.
Yeah. Make your life easier. That's all right. That's all right. Thanks for doing it. Okay, and you're.
I'm Shatara Claiborne. I'm the
president-elect of the Ypsilanti Kiwanis Club. I work with a lot of different organizations, I guess, Join Hope and Girls on One, and some other ones, but I do all the marketing and most of the publicity for the Kiwanis. I do all the social media and all that stuff. So I'm hoping to learn how to market ourselves better because a lot of people don't know about us and what we're doing in the community and who we are. So I would like to know how to write a press release and anything else I can learn.
Okay, great, thank you, thanks for coming. Cindy?
Candy.
Oh, sorry, Candy.
I'm Candy Newton, and I work for the Washington County Bar Association, so we are a nonprofit as well. We don't do a lot of press releases, but we can market ourselves much better. We run a lawyer referral service that we really need to market better. And pretty much everything she said.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, Candy. And Ian?
Yeah, I'm Ian Reed Twist. I'm pastor at Holy Faith Church in Saline, and I feel like we do a lot of great stuff, and I need to get better at getting the word out about our activities and stuff we do. And I actually have a background in writing. I have an MFA in creative writing before I went into my current line of work. But I don't really have much of a background in journalistic writing, and so I sort of wanted to learn.
Okay.
When I did have one other question, I
Yeah.
noticed that you used it as an example, not something about no big checks, which I presume is don't take a picture with a big check. Well, it's funny you would say that because I was just about to do exactly that with a race that we're running. We raise money for something, so I'd be curious to know why and what's a better approach.
Okay, I'll just write that down.
Oh, and I also should just say really quickly that unfortunately I have to go early. So
Oh, okay, well, thanks. Thanks for coming. Joe?
Hi, my name's Joe Boblis. I am on the executive committee of the Washington County Republican Party, and they asked me to be on the public relations subcommittee. And so I came here to see how you do press releases so that I can help explain what we're doing.
Okay, good. Well, we're going to be doing that hands-on for the second half, so hopefully that'll be helpful to you. Thanks for coming. Tanya?
Hi, I'm Tanya Wilt, the editor of the Ypsilanti Courier Manchester Enterprise, also currently transitioning into our community engagement editor position. I am very excited to hear kind of what you're being told to put in press releases, so when I see things and I go, what? I understand why people are doing what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a good point. That two-way. Great. Okay. Well, thanks for everybody for letting me know a little bit about you. Obviously, it's going to be more of a sharing than me lecturing you. So I really appreciate that you're here. We're all here to share the information. So what we're all after, I guess, is something like this, and I'm going to send this around. This is a great story about the epitome of the wonderful Girl Scout. Hannah Reiser from Brighton created a creative space at an elementary school that was closed down in the Brighton area, and she won the Girl Scout Gold Award, and that's the equivalent of the Boy Scout Eagle Award. And this is a story that was done by a reporter for the Livingston County paper, and it ran on their front page. It was Local Girl Does Good, and of course was on their online service as well. So this is what we want all the time. This is not a story written by me. This is a story that a reporter was assigned to, and that's my goal. It's not to get my stuff in the media, online, on the air, but to get other people interested, because they're going to give it better placement, better coverage. This is going to be more powerful. So this sometimes happens, not always, but the key to this is local. And I think that's really the one thing I'd like you to keep in mind from tonight. You were saying, Bob, that you cover, the whole state?
Yeah.
I cover about half of the state down the middle. But what we are challenged with is taking our stories and making every story a local story. They say all politics are local politics, right? You've heard that? Don't know if that's true or not, but in a sense, all news is local news. Because if we can't engage the gatekeepers like Michelle and Tanya and others to see why it's important, then it's very difficult for us to get through to the public or any aspect of the public. So what I'm going to do is send this around, and this is not really part of the formal presentation, but what I did was I culled out some stories. This is a great one, little Girl Scouts painting a boat ramp on the Saginaw River. Unfortunately, the same day we had the Channel 12 news there from Flint, the Girl Scouts found a dead body in the Saginaw River. So our nice little story about Girl Scouts painting the boat ramp didn't get on the news. Girl Scouts find body. So, I mean, that's the reality of what we're dealing with. But in almost every case in here, what I tried to do was to highlight the story with a local girl, so that you think it's all about your community when you read this story. Whether it's Mackinac Island Honor Scouts, Gold Award girls, people who went to the National Convention. 3 Owasso women attend historic convention. Well, that's only a headline in Owasso. Nobody cares about the Owasso women anywhere else in the state. But in Owasso, for the Owasso Independent, they really care. So that's what we try to do. It takes a little extra time. So let me send this around. We'll be talking about some of the things in here, but you can just kind of page through that if you want or whatever. So we're going to talk about the elements of news. And I got this from Fair Test, the National Center for Fair and Open Testing, but these 8 elements are remarkably similar to the ones that I learned in journalism school such a long time ago. And the first one is immediacy, and that's the timeliness of the news. Many times, Linda and I will get stuff in from a Girl Scout leader that said, "Oh, the girls did this great service project. They sang carols and they took Christmas cookies to the nursing home." Well, that obviously happened in December, and this is almost June. So, what little news value it had, which is very minuscule, is pretty much shot because they didn't send it to me in December. So that's the key to immediacy, and we all know that. The difficulty for you, Tanya and Michelle, is that we often have stories, but in organizations we have to get them cleared. So we can't just say, "Oh, that's a great story, I'll send it out today." We have to go through channels, and that's sometimes what takes the time. Outside of the news business, the world doesn't move at the same pace. People sometimes have to get approvals from the CEO or the department head. I'm not sure how it is with political parties, but you can't always just shoot a story out there, even when you have all the facts. You have to get a sign off. You have to get somebody to sign off on it. So anyway, immediacy is number 1. Number 2 is what we were talking about earlier, proximity. Things that happen personally to you, like if your fire station closes down. I live in Superior Township, 3 miles from the firehouse. If they close that down, I want to know about it. You're saying people don't know, Mark, about local news in their community. I want to know. Why is the fire station closed down? If it closes down on Scioto Church Road or Dexter, I'm not as concerned. I personally am not as concerned, but the people in Dexter are concerned, right? If they lose a fire station, potentially. So likewise, if something happens on the other side of the state, our folks don't care as much. So we have to make it proximate to where people are going to be reading or seeing the news. So what we say is take off your I love my organization hat and say, who cares? Who cares about this? And the way to make people care is to make it immediate and to make it personal for them as much as possible. So that's the second element, proximity. The third one is prominence. And so what that means is that if you have a CEO who's done something outstanding, or if you've just gotten a grant, or you've discovered something, or you have a speaker coming to your annual meeting who people would have heard of, you have a powerful element of news for a while. An example of this is when I worked at United Way for years, we had an annual meeting. It was very boring. We had local people talking about what the United Way did, and I tried every year to get the news media to cover it. They wouldn't cover it. I'd send a news release, I might get a paragraph. So one year when we got our new boss, Sandy Rupp, she said, let's get a nationally known speaker. So we got Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, who's the daughter of Robert F. Kennedy, and she had been a senator, I think a state senator, I'm not sure, but anyway, she came and spoke. And we had like 500 people. Normally we got like 50 people at our annual meeting. 500 people came because they wanted to see what Kathleen Kennedy Townsend looked like. Did she look like her dad? Did she sound like a Kennedy? They were curious about her. So we got big newspaper coverage because we had a quote-unquote celebrity. You can't always do that, but sometimes your CEO has a reputation as an expert, and we'll talk about that later, or maybe the nature of your topic is something that would be prominent in the news or timely. And this is not a great example, but right now there's a big interest in archery, in young people learning archery because of the Hunger Games movie. So what we're trying to do is promote Girl Scout camp with archery. We've had archery every year for 30 years, but now all of a sudden people are talking about archery. So what we're trying to do is find out where people are, what they're thinking about. Okay, and then we come to oddity, and I like to say this is what the internet is for. You know, the slinky going down the treadmill, you've seen that one? You know, the hamster where the guy points his finger at him and the hamster falls over dead. I mean, now that we have the internet, we don't have to worry about odd things in the newspapers as much as we used to. But oddity is basically man bites dog. You know, if a dog bites a man, that's not news. If a man bites a dog, that's news. So if you have someone like a mother lifting an automobile off of her baby, or a teen traveling around the world, that's somewhat newsworthy. You can understand why. It also combines with human interest, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So often, as Steve Garagiola always says from Channel 4, kids and puppies and kids. That's what they want to show you. So, and then I wanted to talk a little bit about, oops, looks like I'm going the wrong way.
Hit backspace.
Thank you, dear. Which is, okay. The odd thing about this next story is that somebody mentioned cookies. Bob, when you saw I was from Girl Scouts, you said, did I bring cookies, right? No? Mark said that, okay. And that's, you know, Girl Scouts equals cookies. Then that's a good thing. But the deal is, that's not news. Girl Scouts sell cookies every year. So every year when we try to get publicity for the cookie sale, Michelle's going, come on. You know, Girl Scouts have been selling cookies for almost 100 years. We're 100 years old. In 1917, they had the first Girl Scout cookie sale. Girl Scouts do good things with cookies. They plant flowers, you know, they go to the nursing home. The only time the Girl Scout cookie sale would make news was if there was some oddity to it. So our next slide is an example. When I got up on Easter morning in 2011 and opened up what was left of the Ann Arbor News, AnnArbor.com, I saw this story right above the fold. Girl Scout cookies come under scrutiny. 2 local scouts question cookies' palm oil link to child and slave labor and environmental damage. So we got on the front page for the first time ever. Note that the Girl Scouts both have their vests on, so that's cool. But this was not a positive story. This is not what we work for. This is not what they pay me for. This is not the spin that we try to put on the Girl Scout cookie sale. But this made the front page of the Ann Arbor News with a story written by a reporter, AnnArbor.com, because it involved the oddity and conflict, and like you don't expect Girl Scouts to be boycotting Girl Scout cookies, right? I mean, that's what you talk about. You say, did you see the story that the Girl Scouts aren't selling cookies this year? When you talk about stuff around your dining room table or at the water cooler, that's when you know it's newsy. So the upshot of this, of course, is that the girls were doing their Silver Award project as cadets in middle school, and they discovered that palm oil was used in Girl Scout cookies, and palm oil harvesting is the cause of the destruction of the orangutan habitat. And so they have been campaigning, and they've won awards from the United Nations to get the Girl Scouts, GSUSA, to not buy cookies with palm oil. Well, palm oil keeps the chocolate on the cookie. If you don't have an oil that can keep the chocolate on the cookie at high temperatures, you can't ship the cookie. So it's really interesting working for a nonprofit that also has a major consumer product, because you get all kinds of questions about safety and health and palm oil. So at any rate, this story was not the greatest story for us, but what it did was it got Girl Scouts on the CBS Evening News, NBC, ABC, the Detroit television stations. And so what we had a conversation. My cousin in Pittsburgh called me and she said, hey, I saw the Girl Scouts on the news. So it was a chance for us to talk about what the girls do. And so what we decided to do was position it as 2 girls who were doing exactly what we tell girls to do, which is to make a difference in their world, to change their world for the better, to take a position, to stand for something. That's what Girl Scouting is all about. So again, this is odd. And years ago when I came to Washtenaw County to work for United Way, I went to see Bob Romaker, who was then the city editor of the Ann Arbor News in those days. And I said, Bob, how can I get the United Way in the paper? And he said, the United Way will never get in the paper because you meet your goal every year. The only way you will ever get the United Way in the paper is if you don't meet your goal or if you have a scandal. Yes, Ian?
What if you pitched it like something like, United Way makes fundraising goal for the 50th year in a row, or something like that.
Yes, yes, that's a good point, anniversaries. Yeah, there is some news value to that, anniversaries. And what we'll see later is, because of the progressive era in the United States, before the First World War, a lot of agencies that we know of today, like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, YMCA, got started. So now we're coming up on a lot of those centennials. So yes, I think there is value in that. And certainly, we'll talk later about the Girl Scouts centennial. Whenever you have a significant anniversary, there's some news value in that. That's absolutely right. But my point was that when Bob Robaker told me that, he didn't know that he was predicting the future, that we would have a huge scandal, not only at United Way of America, but also right at Washtenaw United Way. So if you were living in this community 10 or 15 years ago, we were on the front page almost every day. I wasn't employed by the organization at the time, but there was no way you could not hear about the United Way every single day, because it was significant that what people had anticipated was going to happen didn't happen. So that made news. Okay, so let's move on. Conflict, we kind of got into this. In organizations, we try to shy away from conflict because that's not what we want to promote, generally speaking. But the element is firmly based in the news formula. Crime and corruption, class of ideologies is more likely for a nonprofit. But when conflict occurs, it's important to have procedures in place to handle responses to the media. So let's go back a little bit. I mentioned the boat ramp incident. That's what made the news in Saginaw and Flint that day. The little Girl Scouts found a dead body, on the banks of the Saginaw River. What's more likely to happen is you work, like we worked for months. We have a program at the Huron Valley Women's Facility where we bring girls in and have a Girl Scout troop once a month. They are the daughters of women who are incarcerated there. It's a great program, and because we were coming up on our centennial, we introduced it Channel 7. So we worked for about a month and a half to get the prison clearances so the reporter, the camera people could go into the prison and interview the girls and their moms. We got clearances, and this was a very sensitive area, as you can imagine, because these girls were, living with their grandparents or whatever, and we couldn't interview all of them. It took a lot of work. Channel 7 was all set to come. It was on a Saturday, the first Saturday in March, and they called me that morning and they said there's going to be an arraignment in the Jingbis Shira murder trial and we can't come. So that's part of the reality of what we're dealing with. It's still a great story. It's unusual. There's human interest. It's timely because we know that if we have programs like Girl Scouting that will break the cycle of criminality in families, we're doing a wonderful thing. But the news is often about conflict. So that's sometimes what we're dealing with. Now, when we have conflict, like the culture wars, for example, I don't know where everyone stands on this, but there's been a lot of stuff on the internet lately saying that Girl Scouting is being supported by or supports Planned Parenthood. That's totally, completely untrue. I spend a great percentage of my time answering media inquiries about that, and maybe you have issues where you work about things that are just out there online. So we're more likely to have to deal with issues where people have misunderstandings about us. So what we've done on that whole Planned Parenthood issue is we have a media section on our website. We put our statement about the truth about Girl Scouts and Planned Parenthood on there. They have my phone number and my email so they can call me, and I'll talk to reporters, parents, volunteers, wherever. We also have statements that our CEO has approved that we can send out. But they have to be updated from time to time because news stories will pop up. I don't know if you know, but right now the Catholic bishops are investigating Girl Scouting, and they're going to come up with their recommendations in the fall. So we're getting ready now, for what that might mean. So conflict is going to be a part of news, and I really believe you shouldn't embrace it, but you shouldn't shy away from it either. I really think my experience has been that the more honest you can be with the news media, if they call you, even if they call you at 3 o'clock and their deadline is 4 o'clock, I would try to have processes in place where I could respond to what they're asking me for, if at all possible. It's not always possible because we do live in two different worlds, but I feel like the best you can do is to give people the straight facts, answer their questions as much as possible, and then just live with it. It doesn't really do to try to cover things up. And we can talk more about that later if you want to. And then there's suspense, and like when a crime has been committed and you're looking for the suspect, or it's really hard to create suspense in most of our stories, I would think, but maybe you could create suspense if you're searching for a school superintendent, a CEO, a new president, maybe. I mean, there's different ways that you can create suspense, but that's part of the news is, what's going to happen. But remember, it's mainly what's going to happen to me or the people that I care about, which, in the case of a presidential election would be the whole country. Everybody presumably has an interest in that. But it's always about what's in it for me, what's in it for my locality. And then we have a motion. We kind of talked about this earlier. The one that comes to mind right now is about the little boy who gave his Disney World trip to the family of the fallen soldier. Did you see that one on the news? That was very moving. That was what television does so well. The little kid said he thought that he was doing God's work or something because he gave this trip to the family of the man who died in Afghanistan, I believe. So that's where nonprofits often, community organizations often have a chance to focus on that one individual, a church, the one family, that single mom, that child who needs dialysis. There's just so many different ways to do that. The challenge again for us is we want our CEO to be the spokesperson. We have certain things that we need to get out there. We have certain messaging. Steve Garagiola and the people from the Livingston County media that I talked to last month, they said, we don't want to hear from your CEO. We don't want to hear from the board member. We want to hear from the mother who's impacted, from the dad who, had to, sell his car to buy diapers. We don't want to hear from the official person. We want to hear from the people who are impacted. The challenge for us is confidentiality, among other things. We can't just take advantage of our clients and say, here, you go talk to the media. It's kind of manipulative. We kind of have to find the middle ground where, a well-spoken volunteer perhaps can speak for the program. It's a compromise. I don't have a good answer for that one. But I do feel that human interest is one element of the news that nonprofits, community organizations, churches have on their side. So, and this is something I dealt with at United Way all the time, that balance between touching the heartstrings of the people, but yet not manipulating, the poster child type of thing. It's really hard. It's really a fine line. Luckily with Girl Scouts, it's not so much a, sad story. It's uplifting for the most part. But I think when you can get the element of that, and also the David and Goliath story of the little guy against the machine, somebody standing up for what's right or standing up for a group of people who are underrepresented, that has some news value to it. And then consequence, and this is kind of related to proximity and timeliness, but it must be important to a large number of people. And again, this is where you're taking off your organizational hat and you're saying, who, outside of our office, who cares about this? Who really cares about this? And if you do a story on Ypsilanti's drinking water, well, the people in Ypsilanti care. People in Grand Rapids probably don't care. But if you do a story where you localize and you say, here in Grand Rapids, so-and-so got sick from this, or here in, Bad Axe or Battle Creek, such and such a thing happened. So what I always try to do is step back, Michelle knows this, and take the big story and make it local. And say, right here in Ypsilanti, 3 girls are going to Mackinac Island to represent their country as Mackinac Island Honor Scouts or whatever. Here in Plymouth, 2 young people are attending this historic Girl Scout event or something. So hopefully that makes a difference to people. But consequence is really broader than that. It has to do with health and welfare and that type of thing. So that sometimes we have that on our side. Go through there. Now I wanted to kind of do an exercise. I don't like those gory pictures, but I try to get uplifting pictures. What I want you to do is just think along with me about the impact of news and good news versus bad news. So everybody knows, right? You can tell me where you were on September 11th and who you were with and maybe what you had for breakfast and what didn't get done that day that you were supposed to be doing and whose TV you were watching or whatever. So everybody knows because of the tremendous impact of September 11th on our lives and the way our lives have changed since then. And if you're old enough, you might know what you were doing on November 22nd, 1963, when our president was assassinated. I can tell you I was in school, I was in art class, my mom picked me up, I know what we said to each other, because it was a defining moment for that generation. It was a terrible news day. It was a tragedy. If you were alive, you had that seared in your brain. Likewise, for those who are old enough, probably no one, they could tell you where they were listening to the radio on December 7th, 1941, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and began the bloodiest conflict in world history. Over 60 million people killed, over 400,000 Americans killed. My dad, tells me, they were listening to the Japanese and the Americans. They were having peace talks in Washington. Wow. The Japanese the Navy was bombing Pearl Harbor. So, and that's seared into their memory because of the impact, the consequence, the human interest, the emotion, the conflict, all those things that we talked about. Those folks who were alive, they will never forget what happened at Pearl Harbor that day. So let's take a look at this date. Where were you and what were you doing on May 8th, 1980, if you were alive? Does anybody remember? No? Does anybody know what happened on May 8th in 1980? Close, yeah, close. On May 8th of 1980, the World Health Organization declared that smallpox was eliminated in the world. And they said something like, the world has won a battle over this terrible disease which has caused blindness, disfigurement, and death to millions and millions of people. In the 20th century alone, smallpox killed something like 800 million people. It had been around for, they think, about 16,000 years, and they declared it eradicated. Now, there are still, I think, some strains of smallpox in labs, maybe in what used to be the Soviet Union. But anyway, this was a great news day, and you could argue that the eradication of smallpox had a greater impact on the world than the other things that we just talked about. But nobody remembers it because it wasn't news. I mean, it was news for that day, and it was certainly news for that year, but it doesn't stay with you because it doesn't have the conflict, the tragic, consequences. It's probably the best good news story of the century, but nobody really thinks about it. So that's kind of what we're up against. So Tanya and Michelle, when we're trying to push our good news at you, and you're saying, what? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to tell you about little girls who are, changing their lives, and things happening in Dexter that are going to make Dexter a wonderful place for the next 50 years. I'm just, maybe at Hope Clinic, maybe you're helping thousands of families to, get clean clothes and food and, healthy lifestyles for their children so they don't remain poor or whatever. I don't know what you're doing. So the things that you guys are doing are going to have this impact over the next, generations, just like we are. It's all about prevention. But that's not real newsy, is it? I mean, it can be, but there's not a lot of news value to a certain thing that happens like that over time. So that's what we're up against. So I just kind of want to show that to you, that we have to compete with what the world calls real news. We have to get the attention of the news keepers, the gatekeepers. We have to try to make their jobs easier by writing in a style that they don't have to rewrite. And that's what we're going to talk more about in the second part of this. And writing in a way that shows them at least some of the 8 elements of news. I don't think every news release is going to have all of the 8 elements. I know it's not, if it comes from Girl Scouts, I hope it does, because I don't want to deal with conflict, and I hope it's not too odd, but sometimes it's a little bit odd. So, but hopefully you'll be able to get one of the 8 elements, or maybe 3 or 4 or 5, into your stories about, the good things that your organization is doing, your volunteers, what's at stake in the political process, what's at stake in the campaign, what Girls on the Run are doing. I know they have very similar goals in a lot of ways to Girl Scouting. So what impact are they having? How many girls from Ypsilanti? How many kids, went back to school with a better attitude or whatever? Whatever it is, your stories, we're trying to get that across. And what we want to do is write in the style that they don't get disgusted with and throw it away. So style, I'm not going to talk a lot about AP style, but I think you had a workshop last week on AP style. I'm going to talk about AP style, the inverted pyramid, the 5 W's and H, and really I have actually 7. I call it the so what. 5 W's, H, and so what, because I think that's really the most important question to ask. Accuracy and then writing bright. So the AP style book, I think it came out yesterday. It comes out every year. around the end of May, and you can get it online, and I love to read it online because I'm goofy about words and such. But anyway, I'll just send this around. I know this is familiar to a lot of you. This is just a compilation. This is an old version, but a compilation of, grammar, punctuation, spelling, word choices, hyphenation, things like that. And I guess what I want to say is that I don't feel that it's reasonable to think that people in your position are going to be experts at style. Style does change. I mean, there are certain things that don't change, but other things do with all the new words that come out. A lot of words get smashed together, like crowdsourcing is one word, and it's a word we didn't have, a few years ago. I don't think anyone expects us to be experts in style, but I think there can be an expectation that we will be able to say what it is, why it's important, who's going, when it happened, where it happened, and so what, and why this is significant. The 5 W's, and say it in a way that doesn't have to be rewritten. And when we look at the news releases, we'll see some work that Michelle did on one of the news releases. So I would say if you could go online and check out the style book, or go to a workshop and practice like this or other workshops, the more you can do to get closer to closer to media style, I think the more likely it is that they won't throw your news release away. Does that make sense? I mean, that's been my experience. So I think that helps. The inverted pyramid is basically the old journalism school deal where you put the most important stuff in the story at the top of the story. Now the problem is that sometimes what the newspaper and radio and TV people think is most important is not what we think is most important, or is not what our organization thinks is most important. That's the problem. Like, we're always told to put the name Girl Scouts Heart of Michigan in the first sentence. Well, that's a long name, Girl Scouts Heart of Michigan. That takes up like half the sentence. So, that may not be the most important thing to the people that we're trying to influence. So my life has always been explaining my organization to the media and explaining the media to my organization. So what you want to try to do is judge what is the lead, what is the most important thing, and get that in the top, and then in descending order, the paragraphs that come after that would explain. You're having an event, okay, how much does it cost? Who's eligible? When is the registration deadline? Have you done this before? Is this the first one? So you'd want to put the most important things at the top, and this is old-fashioned, but I believe it came from the old-fashioned days when they used to have actual physical pieces of paper that we used to paste up. We used to paste up things on big boards, and if there wasn't room for the whole story, they would just cut it from the bottom. So if you cut something off the bottom that was important, you were out of luck. So they just put the most important stuff in the first paragraph, which is not the kind of writing that you do in creative writing, certainly, but it was effective for that time. So that style has maintained itself, and I guess, frankly, maybe Michelle or Tanya, you could talk about this. Probably when people are going through these news releases, they're trying to do it pretty quickly, and they need to know what the heck is important about this. Is that?
Oh yeah, I have some, they tell me all about the event, and they put the date, the time, and location at the very bottom, not written in any format, it's just a list. And then I have to go move that to the top, write incomplete sentences, and you wouldn't think it takes a long time, but you want to make it look good,
So, yeah, you try to
but
do it right.
it's a pain.
Yeah, so we'll talk, when we do the exercises, we'll talk about, here's an example that Michelle sent me. This is about the American Red Cross blood donations, and it talks about how summer is so much fun, the high school students donate. They won't think about doing it in the summertime, and then they have a big quote from their representative, and then you can have a virtual community, and just because summer is here, and then way down here, about 4/5 of the way down the page, they announced 2 blood drives. At Saline Hospital on June 11th, and St. Andrews, I guess that's St. Andrews Church in Saline, on June 24th. Well, nobody's going to mess with this. And obviously what they're doing is they're trying to be creative, and they're trying to get their message across about how they need blood in the summertime, because the high school and college students aren't given blood like they usually do. But what they want you to do is sign up for this blood drive. So what you need to do is rewrite the story so that these guys can see that you're having a blood drive on June 11th, right? Mm-hmm. So that's probably one of the most obvious things. But there are other things like that. Ian?
Is there any value to having even one sentence at the beginning that's sort of a hook? You know what I mean? Like I found myself going back and forth with trying to provide a hook and starting with the most relevant information.
I don't, do you want to answer that? I mean, I always have an opinion.
I think it's
but-
fine. Like, if they had moved all that information up on the blood drives to at least the second paragraph, you can lead with the hook, I would think, and as long as you have that stuff right near the top
Yeah.
and kind of just tie it in more, I think that would work better than way at the bottom,
Yeah.
unrelated.
Yeah, and that takes a little more work, and I think that's what, I mean, you're dealing with the whole state, we're dealing with 33 counties. We don't have a lot of time to localize stuff, we really don't. I mean, we have to get the story out as we see it, and then probably let's just say let's say they did this for the whole state, probably at the bottom, they probably had different blood drives in each county. Well, because that's fast, and they got the news release and they put the blood drives at the bottom. Well, what we have to do is take more time, and that's where Linda helps me to write something at the top where we can plug in the local information. So that's that's my big thing for you guys is, if you're covering more than one locality, make it so that it appeals to a locality, a local community. So that's a little bit about inverted pyramid. And we talked about this, the who, what, why, where, when, how, and what I say is who cares or so what. Even if you give me the 5 W's and the H, why? You're having an annual meeting, you're inviting so-and-so, it's here, it costs $40, it'll start at 7 o'clock. Why? Everybody has an annual meeting. So it has to be about some content, whether it's a speaker or some achievement you've made, or maybe you're having your volunteers. We'll see that more when we get into the photos later. Oops. So, okay, let's move on. So accuracy, I think this is, generally we all say that we are accurate and we want to be accurate, but I think what happens, like with the 100th anniversary of Girl Scouting, we had, up in Lansing on March 10th, we had about 3,500 girls and adults celebrating. We had a sing-along in the state capitol. It was a great event. It was crazy cold, but it was a great event. But our people wanted to say, we had 5,000 girls, we had 8,000 girls. Like 10 years ago, they had 10,000 girls, so we wanted to say that we had 11,000 girls to show that we were better than what was done 10 years ago. But we didn't. We had 3,500 girls. So every time I saw a story, it was like, 10,000 girls at the state capitol, which was not true. So you can't, and if you want the Lansing newspapers, Lansing TV stations to cover the event, you can't lie. You can't tell them we're expecting 10,000 girls when they get there and there's only 3,000. I mean, you just can't do that. So that's the problem, is people tend to want to use hyperbole or just exaggerate the impact of something. It's better, I think, to say, like another example was we had all 31 women in the Michigan legislature were invested as honorary Girl Scouts, but only 7 of them actually were invested. So it's great that 7 women in the Michigan legislature were invested as Girl Scouts. It would have been better if all 31 were, but there weren't 31 people there. So when I called Channel 10 in Lansing to get them to cover it, and they went over there and they said, "Where's all the women?" So then I had egg on my face because we declared that we were going to have 31 women. So you just can't do that. You just have to be accurate with numbers and quotes and stuff like that. And you can declare yourself like the best nonprofit medical clinic in the world, but they're going to say, "So what? Who said that?" So they're not going to use that if they care about stuff like that. So I can declare that Girl Scouts are the world's premier leadership development organization for girls, because that's one of our message points. But if there's nobody outside of Girl Scouting saying that, it's probably not going to stay. They're probably going to edit it out. So I think sometimes when you have stuff like that, you can attribute it to an outside expert, or you can at least put it in quotes from your CEO, as a quote or something like that. Okay, and then bright writing, and Linda hears me talk about this all the time. And really, you are making a sound in the reader's head when you're writing, because he or she is reading, and the reader that you first want to influence is the news gatekeeper. And if you have a lot of passive voice, and if your sentence structures are all the same, and if you have boring verbs and lots of adjectives, and if you have a lot of words that end in tion, it's going to bog down the ability of the reader to understand the power of your story. So what I try to say is that every word should work as hard as it possibly can, and do as much work as it can, and hold as much meaning as it can, so that you don't have a story that starts out, the board of directors, or let's see, a new program was established by the board of directors at its regular meeting the third Tuesday of every month. It's what? What's that sentence about? Boards do stuff. Tell me what they did. Tell it in active tense. Tell me what the significance of it is. And that's probably a poor example, but the more you can do to use active tense verbs, shorter, stronger, more powerful words, no jargon, and Girl Scouts gets into jargon all the time, because when you're in an organization, you're talking that language, but optimizing collaborative decision-making capabilities and structures. What did I just say? Did I say anything? I might have thought that I said something, but optimizing is like a dead word. Collaboration's been overused. I mean, collaboration is important. It's important to work together, but just mix it up and just say working with other groups in the community, or working with Girls on the Run and Hope Clinic, or whatever it is that you're actually doing. And I'm not sure I'm getting this across to you, but the more you can do to make it an active sentence that kind of bounces along rather than bogs people down, I think the less likely it is that newspaper and other media people are going to change your copy. Because if they can understand it, then they figure their readers and their audience can understand it. Do you guys want to chip in on that, or is it? I'm not sure. I guess that's a really important thing to me, and I'm not sure that I'm really communicating that the way I want to.
I'm just trying to type everything.
Oh, okay.
Not as engaged.
No.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. Does anybody else have any feedback or insight on that? Okay. That's a hard one, but go ahead. Yes. Mhm.
I think the problem I have sometimes is I don't want it to sound too much like a layman, I guess you could say. I want to sound professional and articulate, but not, enough so that the story will get in and come across, but not sound too much like a layman.
That's a good point. I think one thing that can help is if you write your story, your news release or whatever, and then have your family members read it. Your husband, your mom, your child, your cousin, and say, what is this about? Can they tell you what it's about? If they can get it, then everybody can get it. Because we're so steeped in what we do, and we know it's important, that we don't always speak the same language. So I would say there is a place for big words. I mean, like every word is a tool. Don't get me started, Linda hears this all the time. Some tools are very specific, and some tools can be used for more than one job, and other tools just have one job. But if you can just write your story and then have somebody read it who doesn't know anything about Girls on the Run or anything else, Kiwanis, who's not a Kiwanian, and I'm in Rotary, and I know we have all this Rotary jargon that we throw around, so I'm guessing there's some Kiwanis jargon, maybe. And you say, oh, okay, I get it. This story is about this. If they can tell it back to you, then I think you've succeeded. But it's a balance. I would urge you to try to eliminate the longer words. Try to find a shorter word that works. If you've heard a word a lot, it's probably stale. And try to make it live a little bit more. But yeah, I know you don't want to sound like a layman, but actually I think the big secret is that stronger, brighter words are better words. With some exceptions. I mean, if you look at the Gettysburg Address, how short it was. Yeah, there were some big words in the Gettysburg Address, but nobody remembers what the other guy said, and he spoke for 2.5 hours, at the dedication of the Gettysburg Cemetery. Everybody knows about Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. He spoke for like 20 minutes. And they were just starting to take notes. The reporters were just starting to take notes, and he got done, and he sat down, and they're like, what? The other guy spoke, he was a great orator, and nobody knows what he said. So I think if we try out our words on other people, I think it helps.
Yeah, I was just going to add, to know your audience.
Yes.
So your audience is laymen, so it's okay to do that.
That's a good point, yeah.
You're not writing unless you're writing for a newsletter for your club, and they're going to understand that jargon. But if it's a wider audience, then it's okay.
Yeah, obviously, like if you're at Hope Clinic and you're writing for doctors, you would use different language than if you're writing for me, because I don't know those terms. But I think that's helpful, and I honestly think subconsciously it helps the news media to kind of be on our side a little bit. They're like, oh, okay, I get this. It's about an award. It's about, a service project. I understand. I don't have to read it twice to figure it out. I got it the first time. So anyway, that's that suggestion. And then tools and strategies, news releases, talk about that. Photos and captions, get into that. And then I think, Bob, you mentioned guest columns and letters to the editor. And we'll get you to talk about that a little bit. Experts and hooks, and then we'll take a break. So when I go to these workshops, I learn these things about photos. Most media wants photos with an attachment. They don't want it in the body of the email because it's harder for them to open it up, right? Michelle's nodding, okay. We need to identify the people in the photo with first and last names, left to right, first row, second row. I wouldn't send a photo with, a bunch of people in it. I would only send a photo with 2 or 3 people in it. Now, sometimes, Linda knows, we do send groups of Girl Scouts, the whole troop. We don't always identify everybody in the whole troop. But if it's a more powerful picture, it's going to have probably fewer people, and they're actually going to be doing something. And they're not going to be holding a big check in.
So that's just a no-no, huh?
Yeah. How many times have you seen that?
Do you ever take?
I would say smaller community newspapers like ours will publish something like that, but
Okay.
there's no, I don't think the larger dailies will.
Yeah.
So it just depends. If that's all you have, I would say send it, but you can do better.
I
I
would
read
say,
one
think
a few
about
weeks
what you're
ago.
going to do with the money. And okay, let's say you get a big check to, let's just make this up, to plant a community garden in front of your church, parish hall, youth center, whatever. Have the guy or the person, the woman or man who gave the money, or the representative of the people who gave the money, there with the kids, putting the shovel in the ground, or something like that.
Yeah.
Because you still want them to get the credit, whoever gave the money. So you want them to get the credit, but make it more like you can look at the picture and you get the story. You don't even have to be able to read, whereas you have to read a check, right? So, okay, so let's move on. So here's a photo. What's wrong with this one?
Tells you nothing.
It tells you nothing. A bunch of people are at some kind of dinner.
And it's
Okay.
the back of their head.
And mostly the backside and a lot of light.
A lot of light, and there's somebody speaking, but we have no idea who he is or why he's there. Is he important? I don't know. Is he a Kennedy? Probably not. We don't know anything about them, but obviously they had a meeting that was a big success, and they wanted to share it. So one thing, if you're having a meeting, I would do a pre-event release and invite the media if you want them to cover it, or if you have to have something after the fact, I would get a close-up of maybe your speaker, or maybe a speaker and a young child who's been helped, or maybe just the young child, if you can get the photo release or whatever, and tell them what the story was, what the event was really about. Now, here's a great picture. It's got 3 people in it, right? What's wrong? You like that one better? These are great. Michelle sent me these. Okay.
The both of them are from our reporters.
Oh, well, never mind that. Never mind that. It's great. It's great.
Examples.
Yeah.
Probably a safer thing to do in this group.
Yeah, right, yeah. So here's the folks from the Marine Corps, the Navy, and something else. Something to do with veterans, I'm guessing. So, 3 people in a picture is not bad, but we need to see their faces, and, they
Actually,
need to
they're
be.
actually in court, which looks like to me.
It's a city council.
Okay, and I was
Yeah.
gonna say, maybe they can't show their faces.
Yeah, but that would be a different story probably, so. Okay, here's another one. There you go. What's that?
The lighting is really weird.
Just a bunch of little people with little pinheads.
Yeah, it'd be better to zoom in on, like you said, 2 or 3.
On one person or 2 people. I actually think podium shots are bad because hardly anybody ever looks good at the podium while they're actually speaking. So we don't do podium shots at all, but we try to get them aside either beforehand or afterwards, with the individual, the senior citizen or whoever. Okay, one more. How could you make this a better photo? This is apparently a DARE graduation at a middle school.
I sort of like the guy's head.
Yeah.
They should be giving a certificate to a child at least.
Yeah,
Something like that.
yeah, there might be a child at the podium, I can't tell.
It's like, please,
I think it's just laziness, and I don't know if your reporters did this one or not,
No,
Michelle.
no.
I mean, they were there, they were seated, they had the camera, they took the shot. I mean, it's just laziness to just get up out of your seat and go make arrangements to get some other photos. Maybe show the kids and then say where they're from. 2 girls from Plymouth, and then send it to the Plymouth media. Don't send it to the, the Belleville or, Manchester paper if they're from Plymouth. A lot of people just don't bother with which that is. And now I apologize for this, but that's in that book that's going around someplace, or maybe anyway, that green folder. What I wanted to do with this was show you this cartoon. And this is kind of what you were talking about, Bob, about letters to the editor. There was a cartoon in the Ann Arbor News, and you can't see here, and that's my fault, a little guy with his backpack. It says affordable summer camp on this empty refrigerator box. And the little guy is looking longingly into the empty box, trying to find an affordable summer camp. And the point was that summer camp is too expensive for most kids anymore. So we saw that in the Ann Arbor News one week, and then the following week we wrote the first letter to the editor as a response to let people know that yes, summer camp is affordable. And what the point of that is that you always have to be reading the media, listening to the media, and seeing what's out there and seeing if there's a way that you can promote your interest in the media. So they almost always print a letter to the editor. The second letter to the editor, the Boy Scouts were 100 years old 3 years ago. They're 3 years older than we are. So our CEO sent a letter of congratulations to the Boy Scout council in each area. That was before they had their big merger, so they had councils in Kalamazoo, Jackson, Saginaw. So our CEO congratulated them, always noting that we're two separate organizations and we have different policies, but yet we have similar goals. What we were hoping they would do was send us letters when we turned 100, but they forgot about it. So I don't know if it's a man-woman thing or what. Anyway, it didn't dawn on them to send us a letter. But anyway, we got our name and our CEO's name in the paper congratulating the Boy Scouts every place where there was a Boy Scout council 3 years ago. So that's a technique. You were talking about anniversaries. That's a technique. You can congratulate someone else on their anniversary if you have something in common with them, if you want to be associated with them, I suppose. So that's another way to use a letter to the editor. And then the third one, which, again, I should have done a better job with these, but it was just that there was a story about girls' poor self-image, and all the difficulty young girls have reconciling the media images they see of highly sexualized young girls with their own reality and what we're doing in Girl Scouting to counter that. So we just had one of our staff people write that letter. So did you want to chip in about letters to the editor or guest columns or anything like that?
No, I was just looking for pointers from your experience.
Ideas, yeah. I would say that, just read your newspapers, watch your TV stations.
Tell me about guest columns, like how is that different from letter to the editor?
Okay, well let's,
Prearranged or?
yes and no. That's actually my next slide, offer an expert. Everybody is an expert at something. Okay, at Hope Clinic, you're probably an expert at medical care for low-income people, or dental care or something.
Both, yeah, both medical and dental care for low income.
Okay, and maybe some of the special challenges of not having a good diet, or the different things I'm guessing that go into that whole situation. So your CEO or doctor or dentist or somebody would be an expert on something. And you see Dr. McGeorge on the news on Channel 2 or Channel 4, Dr. whatever his name is. Well, he's a doctor, but why is he on television? He's not a better doctor than everyone else. He's just on television because he put himself out there. And when I was at this workshop at the Livingston United Way and I met Steve Garagiola, he said, you guys are the experts. So if we want to know something at 4 o'clock for a story that I have to file by 5 o'clock, if I can call you and get a quote from you and get you on camera, you'll be my expert for that day. So if you got expertise about something, you need to be out there with your business cards, with your fact sheets. You need to have your website have a media page with your name and email address on it, because the electronic media, the broadcast media is a little worse at this than what used to be print media and now is online and print, but they will call you at 3 o'clock for a comment at 4 o'clock, because they have to go home at 5 o'clock. It never occurs to them that you have to get your CEO to approve anything that's said, and she's at a conference, and that's just the reality of our world. But if you can put yourself or your expert out there, you can get quotes, sometimes get in the media to talk about what you know about. And then the guest column is something that we've started to do just this year, actually. This is a guest column by Jan Barker that one of us wrote. Who wrote this one? You or me? You, okay. So,
that? We want your Jan.
Well, the reality of it is that we don't speak for ourselves, we speak for our organization. So Jan also speaks for the organization. I'm not authorized to put my face and my name out there. I'm authorized to prepare a platform, if you will, for my CEO to put her face and her name out there. So it's really not Jan's writing or my writing, it's the Girl Scouts writing. So, I mean, that's the corporate side of this. It's not me personally, it's really not even Jan personally. So when she's speaking in this capacity, she's speaking for our organization. She's not speaking for herself. So as a guest columnist, she writes an article with a photo that says summer camp is a positive difference. And I love the first sentence because that's from a book called Last Child in the Woods. And the first sentence is a quote from a 5th grader. It says, "I like to play indoors better because that's where all the electrical outlets are." And that was written about 5 years ago, but it's still quite true that kids are not connected to nature. They're getting heavier. They're not getting outside. So camp is one way to counter that. There are many other ways, but we grabbed onto it as our lead, if you will, for that article. So once a month we send out something from Jan on some different aspect, and I think it takes a little bit of work, but I think you could do this. I think you could set yourself up or set your CEO or bishop or whoever up as an expert on something and send it out, and not everybody will pick it up. Not everybody will pick it up. A lot of times if they don't pick it up, though, like Jackson Television, JTV and Jackson just had Jan on talking about summer camp. They didn't run this, but they recognized that she knows something about summer camp, so she was just on JTV today.
So when you send it out, you say, those kids find a guest column?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And some
But
people will use
What
it.
we're trying to do is encourage more people, because there's less and less room in print.
Right.
Yeah.
It's online, so we want you to start your own blog. And
Mhm.
blog it, we will link to your blog, we'll promote your blog, and then we might repurpose your blog in print if we have the space.
So, and then just finally, the news hooks or pegs, which we talked about. We talked about historic anniversaries, holidays. We do a lot of stuff around the patriotic holidays like Memorial Day, Flag Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, because Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts are perceived as patriotic young people, and they are. So we always talk about, Girl Scouts remind citizens to honor the flag. Well, that's not news, but it's a little bit timely in that, we have all these patriotic holidays in the summertime. So it's a reach, but when we say Girl Scouts should honor the flag, we always say Girl Scout troop such and such from Northville reminds you to honor the flag, and then there's a picture of the girls and their names, and then it's my girl, didn't you go to school with her or whatever, so it's, I see, Girl Scouting is active in Northville, and that's really what we're trying to say. So it's all about making it local. So then research results, we have something called the Girl Scout Research Institute, and we release the results of different surveys that they take that show that, like, in that one article in the letter to the editor, it said 81% of 8 to 10-year-old girls are more fearful of getting fat than they are of losing their parents. They would rather lose their parents than get fat.
Wait a minute, that's not what it means.
It's like
No,
saying
I
people
know.
are more afraid of public speaking than dying.
I know, but
It's the same.
I know,
Yeah.
but the point is, we have this research that we can then sometimes use. So, and we can't always use it, but there's a huge problem with preteen girls and their self-image. We do know that. So what we're trying to do is counter that. So anyway, we do have
But
that.
they love their parents.
Yes, but they're more afraid of being fat, they say.
Well, you're more afraid of things that are more likely to happen.
Right, exactly, yeah. And then awards and popular culture, I mentioned about the archery. And then oddly enough, convention attendance. And my last slide is one that was tied into our anniversary in March. So what we're going to do is take a break now, if that's okay, and then come back, and I have some news releases for you guys to work on. So I thought we could divide up into like 3 groups, and then you could have fun with those, and then we'll address your questions, and then we'll be done. How's that? So what do you think, Michelle? 10 minutes, or is that good? Okay.
That might be too long.
Okay.
Pizza round?
Like 8, 5?
And you get a budget. Yeah, maybe 5.
5? Okay. How about quarter after? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
30 seconds.
Yeah, that's it for me for this.
Did you have anybody's handout packets?
Some people printed them out. We didn't print them out for you, but some people printed them out. So.
No, they gave us a link.
Yes, that's on.
I got the link, I didn't go.
Is it gonna disappear offline at some point?
No.
You can download it. Oh, can you?
Yeah, it's on
Then
script.
you don't have to worry about that. Eric's, PowerPoint.
Quick question, do you use Mac now?
Did you not?
I use Gmail stuff.
I have this problem with Backmail, which Michelle's aware of, which is that whenever I attach a photo, it doesn't attach it, it throws it right into the email. I can't figure out how to do it.
But you did send me the photo, so I'm like,
Yeah.
how do you manage that?
Well, I have to go into my personal account or some Hotmail and do it that way. You know, I can do that, but it's not popular.
Oh, thanks so much. Appreciate that. You have to run. Okay, let me just give you. The rest of the stuff you can download. And these are just the 4 releases. Yeah, you can just play one of these. These are bad releases. So we're going to do a group exercise with finding a lead and finding, what's in it for me. If I'm from Ipsy or from Ann Arbor, why do I care? A lot of times you'll find a lead, but it'll be